Switching gears now, a source tells Fox 8 that Governor Jeff Landry spoke with President Trump about the Orleans Parish indictment against State Attorney General Liz Murrill.
Gabby Killer reports the Louisiana congressman now says he's asked the U.S. Department of Justice to investigate the grand jury proceedings that led to the indictment.
Congressman Clay Higgins says he wrote the Department of Justice in the aftermath of Murrill's indictment. He says he asked them to take a, quote, deeper look into the proceedings that led to criminal charges against the AG. Higgins says the DOJ confirmed they received the letter, but that he hasn't heard whether the FBI or other federal authorities are now looking into the case. An Orleans Parish grand jury indicted Murrill on counts of public intimidation and malfeasance in office earlier this month. Attorneys for Murrill have since raised questions about the grand jury proceedings that led to Murrill's indictment, considering the grand jury initiated the investigation into Murrill itself. Murrill's attorneys have also cited media reports that came out ahead of the indictment as evidence there had been leaks and that the grand jury process was tainted. Higgins says he asked the DOJ to investigate in hopes that they could gain a, quote, totality of the evidence.
I thought that should be looked at the federal level. So I had a legitimate investigative purpose and I did the right thing. If the same thing happened again, I would do the same thing. It was a high-profile incident, and historically, I'd never seen anything like it. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation is the highest law enforcement investigative authority in the nation. And you know, people of Louisiana and indeed across the country deserve to be able to look back upon this and say, yeah, this was thoroughly investigated.
A source tells Fox 8 Governor Landry spoke with both President Trump and federal authorities about the case when he was in Washington, D.C., celebrating America's 250th birthday earlier this month. Governor Jeff Landry previously asked state police to investigate the same grand jury proceedings. State police said earlier this month it is coordinating with the governor's office and, quote, all involved parties in the case.